All right, welcome back. And so I am hoping to share a little bit about what integration is, right? I want to unpack this key term so that again, that we're all on the same page and all have a sense of what we're talking about when we use the word integration. So again, it's a term that indicates wholeness, oneness, and the fact is that integration is something that we can do with actually any discipline. We can integrate any two disciplines and bring them together to kind of have a deeper and richer understanding. For instance, the biopsychosocial model is an integrative model. It's saying that we can learn from biology and it can inform our psychology, and that our psychology can be informed by sociology. And all three together are not going to be, they're going to be, they can be unified and can inform one another, but they can also still remain on their own. And so they can still remain distinct. And so I think that, and distinct and valuable. And so I think when I think of integration, I think that's a good foundation to consider. That we're already doing integration when we're talking about biology and social factors. And what we're doing with Christian integration is just a specific and different type of that. So classically, Niebuhr came up with four types of integration. And so he talked about, Niebuhr talked about how we can relate Christianity with culture, culture broadly. And he came up with basically four models of the relationship between Christ, Christianity, our faith, and the culture and science of the world. And so I want to walk through those because I think it's helpful to understand, or it helps us understand the nature of integration. So the first one is actually Christ or Christ or religion against culture. Culture. So from this perspective, religion will take precedence and will override culture. Our religion would dictate the norms of society. It would dictate the laws of the land. It would certainly dictate the science, the so-called scientific findings, and say, oh, you have to think about it this way because this is the way that religion speaks about it. And so this might come about with someone who is Islamic fundamentalist, where they might want to live in a society of Sharia law and say that this is our religious belief and this is the way that society should be run. And so again, it could be the belief among Christians could be the same, where Christians might say, you know what, we think uh, that creation, the Bible teaches creation, and so we need to look at science as science should align with that belief in creation, and say that any scientific finding that disagrees with the biblical account of creation should be invalidated outright, and that it should not be accepted. So that'd be religion or Christ against culture. And then the other side of that idea would be religion of culture or Christ of culture. And this is again the opposite end of the spectrum. This is where culture really dictates what the religion actually should be. Or another way to think about it is science would dictate what religion should be. So this is saying that any scientific finding would um, eradicate any religious teaching that seems to be in contradiction or conflict with the scientific idea. So anything that says, okay, science has found that there's this uh, principle about, for instance, I was just reading the other day that Psychology Today wrote an article that claimed that psychologists view adultery as potentially beneficial, and arguing that monogamous relationship is not the best type of relationship. And to be honest, this is not actually the mainstream view of most psychologists, but they found a few people who do believe that. And so, if we had religion of culture or of science, we might take on that belief and say, oh, we need to adapt our religious norms so that they are simply in alignment with our so-called scientific findings. That we should adjust our religious belief and now say that adultery is not a sin because there is science that argues that it's healthy and good. And so that would be religion of culture or Christ of culture. The third one is Christ and culture in paradox. So Christ and culture in paradox is this idea that there is compartmentalization, that there is a separation between the Christian world, Christian beliefs, and what Scripture teaches, and that has a domain on a certain part of our life, and that's one compartment of our life. And then culture in science has a claim on a different part of our life. So the idea of a Sunday Christian who spends the rest of their week being uninfluenced by their faith. And this is one that I think it's fair to say, well, APU students come from a lot of different backgrounds, and I struggle to talk about the average or typical APU student, but I would say that this is probably the more common among APU students, that oftentimes they will take on teachings from church or even chapel, and they'll apply that to their life, and that they'll see that as, okay, this is a part of who I am. And then there's going to be another part that they'll take on from their classes or from general culture, and there's not going to be a lot of conversation or dialogue between the two perspectives. They're basically, again, compartmentalized so that they have their part of their life that believes certain things, allows them to believe, and then there's another part of their life that just says, okay, I'm operating by a different set of rules in this context, or a different set of convictions in this context. And so that's one that I would say is not integration. That is not actually bringing wholeness, because it is compartmentalization. But it's one of those things that we're trying to overcome when we're talking about integration and trying to help students do integration, is to say we want to break down those artificial walls that you have that divide up your knowledge, divide up the way that you view the world into your religious and secular ways of looking at the world, and bring them together and say, okay, if we bring them together, what's going to happen? Maybe we have a richer and deeper and perhaps even more complex view of the world. The final one is that Niebuhr talks about, and Niebuhr wrote this classic text in 1956, so this is about 60 or 70 years ago. And the final type was religion and culture in dialogue, or Christ and culture in dialogue. And this is what we're really talking about when we're talking about integration. We want a dialogue to occur, that we want to see Christianity, religion, having a conversation with science. And again, not necessarily a conversation where one always takes precedence over the other, that would be religion against culture or religion of culture. What we want to see is actually some mutual edification or mutual growth, that we have a deeper and more complex view of the world as a result of integration. And so, yeah, so I think that I'm going to sign off. That's what I wanted to say. Well, let me say a little bit more actually. So when we're talking about integration, oftentimes we're trying to have this dialogue where we're trying to gain knowledge and understanding from the two sources so that we have a not just like we have with the biopsychosocial, we're having this dialogue that says, okay, here is our perspective. This is how we see it, and that might be the Christianity worldview, the perspective given in Christianity. It might be the convictions, the ethical, what they value as most important, all of that. And then we have psychology and say, oh, well, this is what we find to be important. This is how we view the world. This is how we see problems and see possibilities. And actually, by bringing them together, you have this opportunity to say, oh, well, I value this, but your values are good too. And we could say, oh, I want to value that too. For me, I've seen like the emphasis on justice within psychology. That's helped me build my faith to say, oh, my faith should value justice and valuing all people. That's important to me as a result of integrative work. That wasn't as well spoken in my Christian faith. In the same way, I think that my view of psychology has expanded because Christianity teaches me that people are responsible for their actions. And so when I look at psychology by itself, I say, oh, well, people are shaped by trauma and past experiences and culture and all these other factors, and those are important. But I think that psychology, I've realized that psychology is missing this idea of important of agency, that the fact that we are in charge of our own lives. And so what I'd like to have is a psychology that appreciates, again, the fact that humans are responsible for their actions. All right, so I paused a second ago, but I will wrap up now. So hopefully that was helpful, and hopefully you have a better sense of the kind of the basics of what we're talking about when we're talking about integration. So I'll end there.